Hey, and welcome back. Great job powering through that lowercase s. Let's work on a similarly difficult letter, our lowercase a. To start on our lowercase a, we're going to pull in our lowercase s, which we just finished, and our lowercase d and q in case we want to do a different style of a. First, we'll talk about drawing a single-story a. Single-story a's are considerably easier to design and draw, and so we already have that DNA in the lowercase d and lowercase q. First, we would duplicate this bowl, the stem, and that serif down at the bottom from the lowercase d and paste it into our lowercase a. And then we'd just duplicate the stem of our lowercase q. Once we have that in here, we can actually just leave that q bit where he's at, and we'll replace the stem of this lowercase d. We just brought it in so that we knew where we would end up. Then we could delete the stem of that lowercase d, and we would have a single story a. We would then repeat the process on our sans serif version. So we'd grab the sans serif stem and bowl of that lowercase d and lowercase q, and we would just duplicate our success. That's a fairly easy and rudimentary way to do it. It's also a way to add a character that has that big open bowl in the middle there. But I personally think that typefaces that have a double story A are a little bit more satisfying and interesting. So we're also going to make one of those. The reason that we start with this lowercase a after our lowercase s is that we have a lot of the data we need in that lowercase s. First, I'm going to start by copying our successful paths, and I'm going to paste it in here. I probably should have deleted this one along the way, so we'll go ahead and do that now. Then, grabbing our lowercase s, we can mirror it, and you'll see that already we have a lot of the DNA we need for our lowercase a. Looking at our little preview here, we sort of already have this weird, wonky lowercase a thing going. And now we just have to adjust it to be exactly what we want it to be. Some typefaces will have this lowercase a, and it'll be a smooth curve right into that portion there, into that overhanging beak. For ours, I think we'll make these two separate things. So I'm going to pull these points down a little bit. I'm going to get rid of this extra one that I don't need. And I'll pull it down even more. And then I'm going to do like we've done in the past. I'm going to grab all the points that I want out of this lowercase s, and I'm going to Command X to cut them. I also don't think that I need these 2 points here, so I'll just get rid of those. And I'll paste that bit back in that I just got rid of. Then I'll Command X to get rid of these points. And I can start to attach this right to where that's going to end up. So we'll bring this point up to about that height. I don't want to attach him yet. We'll double click and I'll move him over to where he belongs, and we'll attach those two. I kept that so that I didn't lose my overshoot that we used in our lowercase s. Then I'll bring this point up to the height that it needs to be, and we'll bring this point over and attach him there. That gives us that back ridge of that lowercase a. I'm going to quick adjust this before we get into attaching this lower bit. So I'm going to bring this down and pull that handle up. That'll give me a little bit smoother transition from one curve to the next. I'll do the same on this side. We'll bring him quite far down and ease that transition. We could also think about bringing in our lowercase n if you want to think about how we're doing this. So you could bring in, like I said, that n here. Think about how this is working, how that curve is working. We can see how this will help us pretty quickly. Looks like we had a stronger shoulder in our lowercase n, so we can go ahead and see what happens when we duplicate that. Again, let's reuse all the DNA and all the successes we've had so far. And that's looking pretty good for our lowercase a. Time for a quick break in the content to ask if you're enjoying what you're watching and seeing, to please subscribe to the channel, because that's the best way to support what's going on in this channel. If you're already subscribed, be sure to like the video, comment on it, and share it with somebody new. All right, back to the action. Then we want to finish off this portion through here. So I'm going to attach these two so that I have points that are working. And just like our S, we want it to end somewhere in that middle there. When I'm looking at our preview here, you can see that none of these paths are making any sense right now for glyphs. So we're going to go path, and we're going to correct those path directions. And now our preview is working. The biggest error we have right now in our lowercase a is that our weight is in the wrong spot. Right now, the weight is still where that spine was in that lowercase s, which is in this horizontal. And counter to our lowercase s, our a works more like our o's do. So I'm going to grab these points here, and I'm going to move them so that they get the thin weight up at the top here, and our thick weight over on that left-hand side. This will more closely match what was happening in our lowercase o's. Then I can start to adjust this letter form so that the counters match. Just like our lowercase s, we want our counters to feel like they have a similar sort of weight. Eventually we're going to adjust these points quite a bit, just like our lowercase s. These are the suite of letter forms that are awfully hard to bear and hard to work through. And now before we go and adjust too much more of this, we're going to fix that third point over here, which is happening through here. Now we could keep some of these details, some of this rounded bit if we wanted to. I think we're just going to end it quite sharp. So I'm going to delete all these excess points that I don't need. Look at Glyphs made this crazy handle for me that I don't need. And we're going to end it somewhere over here so it just sort of ends straight into that lowercase a. Right now, my lowercase a in stroke is sort of matching that serif. That's okay, and we can keep that if we want, but I might match something closer to that lowercase d so that it's talking to one another. I might add it as a component so I can see what's going to happen. So I'll add my component, type in lowercase d, and we can see now exactly what's happening when we drew this lowercase d, and we can start to work through that in our lowercase a. Again, we might pull these points up here and start to match some of what this path is doing. We'll pull this one up here and start to match what that path was starting to do. And you'll notice that I'm not matching it exactly. That's because the weight change in my lowercase a is going to be a lot tighter than my lowercase d. Just because it has half the distance to change weight as the lowercase d. So I'm going to take some liberties in my lowercase a and not totally mirror what that lowercase d is doing, but at least make it close so that when I look at those two together, they have the same tonalities and the same feeling as a letter form. Then something else I might start to do is bring in the other letter forms that have crazy things like it. So my E and my S all have something similar. So I could type these three in any sort of sequence. I'm just like randomly typing A's and E's and S's. And now we can start to see how that crossbar is going to work in our lowercase a. When I zoom out and look at this, it doesn't feel too bad weight-wise. It does feel like it might be a little wide, or that I might need to bring this part out in a smoother curve. So I can go back in here and edit this. I might narrow this up just a little bit. I'm going to look at it again and say this part probably needs to be a little bit thicker. So I'll grab that bar and I'll make it thicker so it matches some of what that E is doing. And just like our other letter forms, we're going to work through the details of this guy so he matches the tonality of the rest of our font. Now, as I'm looking at this, it's sort of strange to see that lowercase a to end in that really sharp serif. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to replace it with the serif that we made for our sans serif lowercase s. In our S, I'm going to go and grab this part here, which we worked quite hard on. I'm going to go into this lowercase a and I'll paste it really quickly. Then I'll flip it. And I'll move them out of the way so I can go grab them in a second. With these points selected, I'm going to Command X just to get rid of them and delete that one because I know I don't want them. Then I'll bring him up here, and we'll attach it, something like that. And we'll bring this point up, and we'll meet them somewhere in the middle there, so they attach and become one letter form. Then that threw off our path direction again, so we'll just go in, we'll correct that path direction, and that feels like a pretty good lowercase a. You can see how that sort of soft entry point gives us a little bit more space to breathe. It feels a little bit more natural, which our typeface so far is feeling pretty natural. We could widen this out a little bit if we wanted it to sit over that bowl a little bit more. Similar to some of our other letter forms that have that overhang or that aperture, we want to make sure that they feel balanced and they're not too set back. And just like that, we have our serif lowercase a. Then to do our sans serif version, we'll grab this and we'll copy it. We'll paste it in here, and we'll get rid of this serif and touch him straight down. I might mention at some point that we are sort of designing a Optima style serif typeface so that we keep that weight. If we weren't keeping in that weight, what we're doing for that sans serif version would be just a little bit different. There'd be a few other details we'd want to manipulate, but it's easiest for us to think about where that weight is in the stroke and how these letter forms work when we exaggerate it in that sans serif bit. Even if we were designing a mono weight stroke sans serif font, there are nuances and details that would continue on the same way that we're doing these letter forms here. Lastly, I'm going to match my side bearings before we go. Let's make sure I know what they are. This will help me just one more time see what this typeface is looking like, see what this A is going to look like. We'll make sure this one's a little bit smaller. And in context, it's always helpful to look at these letter forms in context and see how they're working. Now I can start to type words, and looking at it in the collection, it's feeling like it belongs to the same typeface, and so I'm pretty pleased and happy with where this is going. I hope this video was useful for you and helpful, and you learned something new along the way. If you did, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and be sure to like the video and share it with other type nerds out there so we can get more people designing beautiful typefaces.